Good afternoon to you, and I am so excited to be back on Civic Space TV. It's been a while, and I know you have been in the safe hands of Maria Alessi, and occasionally Tricia Gloria Nabaye has stood in for me, and also for Maria. But it's good to be back on the show. This is home. It's always lovely to host amazing women and just talk about governance and accountability issues in our country. This year is an interesting one, and this week especially is an interesting one. On today's show, we're going to be looking at some of the stories from the week, not necessarily the ones that ruled the news, but some of the stories that have happened during the course of the week, and just weighing in on those matters. But before we get into the conversation, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all our viewers. This week we hit the 2,000 mark at Civic Space TV, and so thank you for subscribing. And please get your family members to subscribe, get your organizations to subscribe, get your staff to subscribe. We need to take the governance discourse beyond us. So thank you for making it happen. We look forward to the next 1,000 and the next 1,000 and so on and so forth. And so on the panel with me today, of course, two amazing women, my friends, my sisters in the movement. We have Tricia Gloria Nabaye, who is not a rare face on this show. Tricia, you're very much welcome today. And then we have Rebecca Achom Rebecca, who is also not new on the show. She's been there. And you were actually part of the inaugural show.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much for having made time. I know that when we were having our first show, we talked to some people and they said they didn't want to be curtain raisers for our show. But you know what? We are thankful for people who dared and did the first show with us. And so today, because we are talking about news, what has been that thing? What have been some of the stories during the course of the week? Maybe I'd just like to come to the two of you and say, what news story caught your eye this week and why?
Begin with Rebecca. So this week has had a lot of, thank you again, Isabella.
You're welcome.
This week has had a lot of conversations. We've had a lot for the FDC, the red card is up, and everyone is claiming it's an FDC initiative, but we know it's an opposition initiative. And so for me, that is something exciting that is new on the political scene for opposition in Uganda. We've also had the Girl Child Day, and so for me it has also been a reflection point to understand the situations girls in Uganda have gone through, especially for the past 2 years. And so the International Day of the Girl Child has been a bit different this year, and so we need to start having conversations on what best we can do.
Yeah. Okay. I know mine are not any different from that. But I think my highlight was the International Day for the Rural Women. It was something that, not that I was interfacing with it for the first time, but that I was giving it attention.
Thank you. I think I also had the same.
So for the very first time, I sat down and with myself, and I'm like, okay, what does this then mean for me? Now that I know and now that we are seeing it, what does a rural woman really want from us? Yeah, so I gave it more attention this year. Or even more spotlight was given to it this year.
And I think those stories also hit home for me. But the one that has really constantly been on my head, and I'm also not sure how to interface with it, is the recent death of the lawyer, a lawyer that died in the bar. Council Tony, and may his soul rest in peace. But you know, it was just one of those. It was one of those deaths that pulls in a lot of service delivery issues, you know, but also pulls in the realities of lockdown, you know, for us, because yes, you died in the bar. Bars are closed, but there were also other people in the bar. And there were bouncers, which means that this was an active bar. And then the bar is run by a son of one of the big shots in government. And then, as if that is not enough, you have a situation where he was beaten, and then they weren't very sure about how to give him medical attention. And then he died from clotting. And then so the issue of healthcare. Then you're also asking how accessible are ambulances to the citizens. There's a lot, you know, and I kept saying this is an unfortunate death that could have been avoided. Yet another avoidable death. in our airwaves, you know. And so, but also the second one that probably touched me was the death of the athlete in Kenya. I don't know whether you heard about her death. Killed by her husband, boyfriend, husband. And the entire family knew this man was abusive. And her friends knew this man was abusive. Even she knew the man was abusive.
And they cancelled her
but
to
she
go
still
back.
continued to stay.
And then he killed her, you know. And then I also just kept saying, but these, when shall we stop having these stories in the news? When will women stop dying? But coming back to our conversation, let me not over-lament about my news, you know. Let's start with you and your news, because your news was one of the big news items
In the week.
This new pressure group, this front, red card, for transition, that FDC is saying we must remove Museveni through other means beyond the, you know, the ballot, you know. Aren't you people taking us on some other wild goose chase?
I need to laugh. I need to laugh at that, because thank you for your concern, but I want to say the journey of democracy in this country cannot just be called off and say it's a wild goose chase. We've had so many fronts, we've had so many changes, we've had some positive impacts, and we've had where it has failed. And so for me, I don't want to say the red card front is already a failure before it has started. No, I want to be positive-minded to think that it's maybe about time we start to really give the red card. I don't mean the physical red card, but start to say, hey, this needs to stop. Because we are moving from a history where we've not had a successive change of government in this country through the ballot. And already the current government is showing that this is not going to be possible. And so we need to start having conversations on how we can actually make this possible.
But what is this red card? Are you telling us to go to the bush? Are you telling us to strip? Are we much? What is this? Because this is not the first time that FDC has brought us these things. And I'm not saying that democracy should come to a stop, but you... What is this? What is this new thing?
So just to explain, the red card is a front. Like any front, it uses different tactics of activism to speak to issues. We also know that in activism, you don't just come and say, oh, we are going to strip only. There definitely are going to be people who are going to come and maybe do what you call the stripping. And there will definitely also be people who are going to come to the front and also say, no, I am going to speak to this issue. Someone who is passionate about supporting political activists who have been arrested. For the first time, we had the red card launched this week. But also this week, from the history of us who have been in opposition, we've also had a comrade who has been in jail for the last 10 years over the walk to work, just got released, and after 10 years, he is finally home in Busoga with his family. So the journey to change is not just a one-off. It is a process.
And I hear you, but again, and I'll bring Tricia Gloria before I begin, and I begin to sound like an enemy of this thing. Again, the conversation around transition, the conversation on democracy, the conversation on change is literally your bloodline. It's your lifeline as a party. And you have had a couple of initiatives that have come up. Why this? Because it's your DNA, it's why you exist. So what is so different about this red card front and around this transitional conversation? But then also you say, you say that the processes can't stop. And yet we know that there were quite a number of formidable faces within opposition that were missing from this from this process, both spaces and institutions. So in the absence of grounded political parties being part of this front, in the absence, when you look at your launch and then you have people like Asuman Basal, you were missing, and then you're like,
But
what exactly?
Yet it has happened at their political party office. It already shows goodwill.
No. It might have, but also we also know that NOP said we're not signing up as members, but we shall ally with you. And so there's a very big difference between allies and members.
So before Tricia ends in, I want to just clarify on some basics. The Red Card Front is not an FDC alone initiative. As you will see the faces that are at the front, we have people like Mukaku who have been people power, and they subscribe to the people power movement.
But your key
not
leadership is
necessarily-
FDC.
But the leadership, that is, if you even see the signings that were happening, it had DP, it had FDC, it had individuals from opposition.
But your chair and vice are
FDC.
FDC. Men.
Yes.
Anyway, let's go to Tricia.
Leave the conversation on men.
Yeah.
I hear you when you say the ghost chairs, and I also hear you that we need to continue organizing. But the problem is doing the same thing over again and choosing that we will have different. This time it will be different, but we've done the same thing. Why am I saying we've done the same thing? We've had reform agenda. We've had TDA as a coalition of parties. We've had, then people power movement came around there. Then we had the people's government. Then we had, so we've had all these initiatives as fronts to do what? Remove the dictatorship.
Yes.
And make sure that for once and for all, President Museveni is gone. But we've not taken stock of where they've failed. Where did the people's government fail, especially in having buy-in? That the front is also doing, especially in buying. What are we are not saying it's bad to want to use other means. We're about to go to the bush, if you remember, to get a Monsico. So regardless of what we are doing, I want us to be, reflective of the fact that it's the same thing we are doing and we've not done it any different. So you have, and then also the argument in public discourse is, who are the people that are pushing for this? You have Mike Mavike, who are very long time people like, they've decided this man has come to make money. He is not for the struggle. He is not about to remove the dictator. Then you have Chidandali, who lost NUP party card, and then now, left because they didn't give me a card, I have gone. So more than anything, is more sentimental. And is he really the person you want to have behind that?
Vehicle?
And leave alone that, also leadership. If we are going to front another movement with a leadership that is, from another party, it's almost you're going to have a fight for who is more sovereign or who takes the lead in this. Movements work when they don't have a solid leadership.
Yeah.
Create a secretariat that is separate from your political parties. Let the political parties fund the secretariat, have people push for the movement. But once you have, a bending to one political party, then you need the buy-in of the other. And the argument that has been coming forth was that NUP is not going to, will ally but will not join, because, in April we sent you a letter as FDC, please join the People Power movement. And there was silence, there was radio silence from that end. So how are you coming back to us to have a buy-in?
We have a people's front.
Exactly. So those are the questions that continually, are pushing people. And to have Dr. Kano Kizza and in all his credibility, be the face of this thing with the backing of Mavike and Chidandali, who are, contentious issues in these spaces, is very questionable. And also to have, it's almost like we've just moved from the people's government where we had Arias Lukwago as vice president, Dr. Kizza as president of the people's government, and we've pushed it into this transition front. So is there anything different? I highly doubt. Are we doing the same thing and hoping we are going to have different results? Exactly. And then the people who you're trying to, because the argument is we may be 75 of the majority who want the president to go, and then they have the 25. But they are doing something, we are doing something that is detrimental to our progress. We keep running in circles hoping that one movement, plan B or plan A or any other plan that we will have in the future, will be the one that takes the man out. So have buy-in, bring everyone on the table. You're not going to have areas represent DP or any other person that is representing DP. When you have their party president say, that guy left, he crossed over. So how are we going to be in something that is going to be contentious when Arias Lukwago is at the helm of it as DP? So you already don't have the buy-in of DP. UPC is off. Bambi, that one. I don't know.
Allow them to
prosper
wherever they are.
I don't know. So then you also have no. Regardless of the fact that they are your allies, you need their buy-in. You need their support. You need their joining. And they don't need to lead. What we are saying is these movements don't need a leader. They need a collective front so that every other person can then buy into them. But once you have Kano Kizza Besigye as a lead. Same thing, different, same
Yes.
results.
I hear you clearly on the aspects of movements in our country. It takes us back to a year ago when we had the People Power movement before it became, the face was Bobi Wine. And so as a country, we would also I want to agree at an individual basis beyond
Your
the political party,
yes.
that maybe we have failed in movement building as a
Maybe
country.
we have failed in leadership.
Maybe we have.
At all levels. Maybe we are too harsh.
Or maybe we just don't want to listen. Because when you walk down the journeys of change in most African countries, you'll find that it's not just one person that takes it on. When Nelson Mandela was in jail, and the leadership was continuing.
Yeah.
The struggle was on. They didn't need to see his face to continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in our country, when Bobi Wine isn't at the forefront, there is an issue.
Or when Besigye
is not at the forefront, there is an issue.
Because
when Museveni is not at the forefront, the NRM starts to question, are they on the right path? And so I think that's a problem we need to also agree on as a country that we need to work on. Yes.
But given the fact that on this panel of three, the only person who can credibly talk about the internal workings of a political party is you, because the two of us really, we are there. Yes. So given that you could credibly talk about, let's talk about women's leadership at the forefront.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, when we talked about FDC,
We
we had
had Ingrid.
Ingrid Turinawe, we had Winnie Kiza, we had Ali
Salama
Salaso, we had
Musumba.
Salam Musumba, they were women. And at times they did not necessarily lead, but they were influencing processes, and we could see them.
Yes.
Where are the women? And I know that there is a lady who was named Miss Akiring. Akiring, yes, from FDC, who is supposed to be part of the leadership, But she's one. We are thankful that at least she's there. She's one. But where are the women? It's like women disappeared from the FDC party.
Sure.
It's like there was an exodus.
No, there's from a honest conversation as a feminist, I will say there has come a time where there is a lot lacking in political parties for women's leadership, and not only in the FDC.
Yeah. But since FDC is leading this front, let us first start from there.
But let us start from the FDC. And so yes, the FDC has gone through a process of refinding itself, and we are still trying to find ourselves. The split within FDC.
But if you're lost, why are you leading a front?
Let us continue. You see, because the father, because the father has lost his job, does not mean he still loses the title of saying, "Let me try and support my family."
Yes.
And so that is what is happening to the FDC. We have gone through a process of refining ourselves, and it is healthy. For me, I want to understand that the journey we have moved of the split, where we've had the ANT come out of FDC and start as a faction within FDC and grow into something, and have still women within the party grow. And so we have gone into our recruitment process. Yes, the women you are speaking of, like Salama Musumba, are still in the party. You have still some other names that are still prominent, and we've had also new crop of leaders come. We are not speaking of Adeke Anne Baju, who is new and thriving, has now risen to leadership.
But Anne is not new, she has always been.
She has been, but we can also agree that her last term has been as an independent. And so
it was a political decision, but we all knew she was FDC.
Of course, definitely. Yes. So what I'm trying to say, but you still bring everything at play, that we still have people playing lead in the party, even when they don't have positions. As myself, I don't have a position in any of the structures of the party, but I am still leading in the political party.
And all we are asking is that why should you lead like that?
Why shouldn't you have a part?
So
and I know that some of the greatest leadership is positionless.
Yeah.
But this is a structure. You have a formal structure of a party. Why don't we have women within the formal structure of FDC, making decisions and being at the forefront of some of these conversations?
So for the last 2 years, we've had a situation in this country. We've had COVID-19 working. We've had parties not change their structures.
You're going to
agree with me that there are different factors that affected FDC.
You mean from COVID on chest women?
From the starters. Allow me to speak, Isabella. Okay. From the starters, the FDC had moved was trying to cope in from a situation of a faction that happened. Secondly, we've had people who have lost elections, and we're moving through a process. We've just come from an election season, and we're still even in the election season. And so we're having a change in everything. Then secondly, we should have had change in our party structures happen last year.
Yes.
But we didn't have this. And so we are doing a recruitment process. But I am definitely sure coming forward, we're going to have women in positions.
Tricia has things, has a rejoinder.
Rebecca, let me add in there, and I'm speaking from a neutral position.
Yes.
I am not anything, I am just a citizen of this country. But I want to speak to the arrogance that came with the political process that led us into the 2021 election. And it was evident the FDC wasn't willing to speak to anyone, because rightly so, they were the leading opposition party. But with such an arrogance comes up, because I've had comments of, ladies like Salama Sumba, abuse other political party people in other spaces, and not to attack any person. But we've also had Nadala Mafabi, revert insults to other political parties, upcoming and not. But the argument is there has been a little level of arrogance when it comes to allying with other political parties as of FDC.
I want you to clearly state that there has been a little level of arrogance of individuals, but not the party.
But the
individuals make up the party. The party is not run by birds.
Yes. Anyway, on that regard, the 2021 general election was a pivotal point in understanding the position of FDC as of now. That wave that came with the new, national unity platform, people voted umbrella, whether they knew what they were going to do or not. But that wave, threw FDC off. And I want to believe that dictators or dictatorships thrive in a weak opposition. And I'll still front that as long as there is, this bickering and this choosing, and then I want to lead, I don't want to lead, we are going to fail at, at uniting. But more or less also, if in your structures, as you keep going, you only have 1 or 2 ladies there, the women's voice is going to continually be stifled. We are aware of the processes that you're in recruiting, in what, but where are these matriarchs that had, been at the forefront, the patriarchs that had been at the forefront pushing, organizing, regardless of where they are right now? In your party systems, you should be able to front them to be able to guide the way. And we are not, pushing for ageism or, segregating people, but we are also believing the fact that there is something they need to be able to offer at the forefront. Regardless of whether, you're shifting your things, you have one woman to show us, but we want to say that women shouldn't be put out of the discourse of political organizing. Don't just, put them on the outside. Oh, they are there, she's Secretary General. No, not that only, but bring them to the forefront so that you can organize together. The movement, if it doesn't have the women's voice, in unison, not in small, we have you there, one, but in unison, not in representation of gender equality. Oh, they say gender equality, one woman. No, in unison of women and men are speaking for the same thing. That if Mama Maria Matembe or Mama who went somewhere and sat and said that women have said, she is speaking not that she's one voice, but that she has, yes. So that is the argument people are having. Can we, and it's also for all the other political parties, there's too much masculinity out there that it's hard to have a conversation where you feel like, I was heard. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's the argument we are bringing. And it cuts across from FDC that is pushing for this front and to all the other fronts that will come out of these seasons that we are in.
Yeah. But also speaking about masculinities and the heavy male character of the political parties, and which is also seen in some of the actions that you choose to pursue. One of these days, we should have a conversation on the report that was recently done by the Christian Democratic Institute and I think the Women's Democracy Network around the heavy sexual abuse within political parties. And your party, we're not really saints, but that is a discussion for another day. Let's move on to the next topic, the next item that has made the news. And we will not spend a lot of time on the next one because, one, all of us have street knowledge on that one. And it's going to be a lot of feelings and emotions. But has any of you considered buying MTN shares?
No.
Why?
Okay, personally, I'm one who believes in stocks and shares and money markets and unit trust funds. And I'm new to these spaces, but COVID taught us to save some little. So you're trying to create, emergency funds that are, and you're investing in things that have less security risks. And I think shares would be one. But it reminds me of the Umeme shares where everyone had to pay. You buy, you join. I don't know if they're thriving. They need to tell us if they're thriving. But telecoms have had an interesting environment in Uganda. I mean, they come, thrive. MTN has lasted, but they come, thrive, and disappear. And buying, I don't want to buy. It's more personal than anything. It's more political because one, it's MTN is a foreign company. If it was Centenary, not Centenary. If it was which one? UTL. I was buying. I would have bought to keep UTL afloat. So if it was a local company, it makes for better sense. But I want the buying to be able to, benefit Uganda as a whole, and it will. But it's a foreign company, and there is a lot of money that is, taken out of this industry back to South Africa or back to where they came from. So that is where my buying is. Where they came from. So, and that is the only contention that I have with them. It's foreign. I mean, these oligarchs are making so much money out of us. So it's more political in my decision.
In your decision. Rebecca?
For me, I wouldn't as well buy. At individual, I do agree with her that I would do something on a nationalistic level. But then I also want to ask, why now? Why now, after all this, we've had a lot of international countries exit the Uganda economy. And so I'm asking myself, why now? Why is MTN doing this, yet it has been here? It's been the longest.
And has been adamant about
putting shares, people in their business.
So for me, I'll just keep on saying, why now on MTN?
Okay.
Until they're able to answer that, there is no
way. I'm not sure they're going to be able to answer that.
They've been answering.
They've been answering. But also, I think for me, it's also a very personal and political reason that when I look at issues of equity and the amount of, I don't even know what to call it, but I keep telling people that I feel there are days when I wake up and I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with MTN.
But
I am that woman who is being battered by MTN, her husband, and I'm staying for I don't know what reasons. And the entire world is telling me to leave, and I'm refusing. And I'm refusing. And so, because it's that type of abusive relationship, I am very reluctant to invest in this relationship beyond the current investment.
Because they have been also exploited.
Extremely exploited. But also when you look at conversations around equity, to be able to have a return on your investment, you must be able to make a sizable investment into the company. So that at the end of the day is which Ugandan will ultimately benefit. Those shares are not in any way going to benefit the average. The average poor Ugandan. So at the end of the day, investing in MTN only widens the divide of inequality. And so for me, it's one of those very political things. But then also, when I look at things like internet shutdowns, when I look at how crocodiles in MTN eat my data and my minutes, keep saying, Banange, if you can eat my minutes, how about my shares? So anyway, but I think the MTN shares are a conversation that as a country we must actively have
it
and not shy away from it, so that we can be able to debunk very deeply personal reasons for not buying, deeply political reasons for not buying, but also to remove the personal and the political from the realities of the economics. Because in the event that people can't benefit from those shares, then I think they should be able to freely invest.
But Babella, you say a very critical thing, especially with the internet shutdowns.
Yes.
I can't make allies with a person who was for a very long time chosen my oppressor. It is almost as though they are owing you into another space where you will not be able to set yourself free.
They may shut you down from your money.
I mean,
You know, eh?
they say, yeah, internet service providers wake up one morning and they tell them shut down, and they gladly shut down. VP tax them, and they gladly, without protest, because these are independent companies. But to be independent and then you don't look so. You get what I'm saying? I mean, it's at the twitch of government where you change your decisions. So when you speak of that, you set back and you look, what does this thing look like? Yes, it looks like a duck, but sometimes it also looks like a chicken. So I don't know where I can put, place my bets and place my stones in such an environment. I would gladly put my shares in something Ugandan, but
yes.
something less political.
Okay, so thank you very much. And I hope that again, on this show, maybe we can have someone from MTN
Come
and with an economist and just educate us, the non-economists, about the economic sense in buying MTN shares. But that's a conversation that has dominated
the space,
the traditional media spaces, but also very much WhatsApp conversations for us who have been in groups. There's been a lot of analysis and about this. But I hope that as Ugandans, this also increases your interest in conversations around stock, money markets, beyond MTN, because there's a lot of other lucrative places that you can actually invest in. But moving on to another story that has been part of our week, in the International Rural Women's Day. Like you, I'm one of those people who didn't even, actually, I didn't know that day existed.
Me too.
And then it came and I said, is it a new phenomenon? And then I realized, no, it is not new. But one of the realities is around the International Rural Women's Day is about giving the invisible labor a face. A lot of times when we talk about invisible labor, we're talking about hawkers, we're talking about market women, but we rarely talk about the women who actually till the food that we eat at home, or that the hawkers and the market women then sell. And we don't know their stories, we don't know. But then also when we're talking about International Rural Women's Day, the realities are that when we look at poverty, we have this thing in the women's movement that poverty has a female face. If you want to just find poverty, look for a woman around and you will see poverty. And yet, in the same breath, these poor women are tasked with feeding the hungry men who are less poor than them, and also feeding children and feeding the country. And so, as we celebrate all the rural women in Uganda today, what are some of the steps we need to make them, one, more visible, but also make them live a life of dignity? I don't know who would want to.
I'll begin on that one, especially because it's an area I like. I'm passionate about it. I know my realities don't speak for ruralness, but I have seen the plight of rural women. I think 2 years back, the African Union, the theme for their International Day of the Rural Women was to retire the hoe. And then what? You get
Bring the tractor?
Yeah, and then what? I mean, these are women who have small chunks of land where they tilt, make the food, and somehow it ends up on the national food basket. So what then can we do for them? My key concern would be in making sure that they actually are owners of this land that they till, that they actually go through the processes of owning it, having land titles for it, and to be able, to acquire easy credit, be able to relegate, but also to empower them enough to know that the money that comes off this land is my money. I know that that's a debate that we can go in where the money disappears. Somehow it disappears.
Vanishes,
So the realities of the rural women are not just the ones that are tilling, but also the ones that go and dig other people's land, or even, go in the mining sector, because they're those that actually crack stones for a living. Is that we've not seen their plight in the urgency of what they need. Like, this is what I need. I am a woman. I don't need a hoe only. I also need this land to be mine. How do we help them acquire land? How do we help them acquire markets as well
Yes.
for themselves, so that there is no middleman there eating away their produce? The pandemic taught me personally, I will speak for myself, that there was a lot of food on the market, but the faces behind the availability of food for us within this region is of rural women that you will not see on a daily basis.
Yes.
So how are we making sure that the money that they get off of this, there was a time a bunch of matoke was 1,000.
Yes.
But how are they earning? Because I'm going to get it for 1,000, bring it to the city and sell it for more. So how am I making sure that I am not disempowering them, even in the money that they receive off the food that they sell? So those are some of the key realities. They may never retire the whole, but in the event that they don't, how do we make the whole a better, lucrative, space for them?
Yes.
And for me, the funny thing that for me I got to know about International Day of the Rural Woman this year is it's just a day before World Food Day.
Yeah. Yes.
It's just, you didn't know, it's a day before. Wow. So while they were celebrating them today, the next day I saw the Vice President of this country moving through a World Food Day program that was held at Mawanda, and they were giving different, it was a fair, and they were showing different kinds of food being made in this country. But there was never a way we recognized the rural women as a country. And for me, the International Day of the Rural Women didn't just bring for me the aspect of farming as a tool that they do. It brought for me conversations around land rights for women, because the rural women in this country, we must acknowledge up to now, and still not owners of the land they are tilling, because these are women who are married maybe into homes, and because we still live in a patriarchal society where women still don't own land and are owned by men. Women have been seen, the rural woman has not been dignified. We see them, we know them, but we have not recognized their plight yet. We want to work, even in our space, and work around women's engagement. We want to work with a certain class of women. And so for me, the rural woman, in a reflection, has had a lot of challenges that we haven't recognized. And we never get to hear their voice speakers themselves.
Actually, when they do speak, because I'm a documentary watcher, but when they do speak, there was a project to help them acquire their land. And one case was with the customary leaders. This was a widow. Her husband left her land, but customarily, she's not supposed to get the land.
Yes.
So in all her might, she managed to be able to bring these customary leaders, get people that helped, and that is an exception to the rule. It's not the rule. So got people to help, and eventually she was given her land as hers, and it was mapped out for her, and she had actually a chapter to that regard. But that's an exception to the rule. The question is, do they know that these systems can eventually work? The land systems, the land rights, can they work for their good? That is an empowerment that they need.
And they do not.
Because when you sit down and talk to them, what is your reality? Then you start to see that they actually want to own the land that they till. Then how do we make that a reality for them?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yes,
you can speak.
No, it's just interesting that we're talking about land, because a few days ago, I happened to be in Pade and Lira, and I met women who ultimately are celebrated under this day. And one of the biggest realities, which we rarely have conversations around when we're talking about land, was widows. So they were saying, no, for us here, when you become a widow, there's a way in which the community manages to successfully send you back to your home. Now remember, you're a widow, you don't have access to land because you were married into that place. When you go back home, your brothers are telling you, you have come take our little land, please go back. So you're like in a no man's situation, and then it becomes so frustrating. But then also, one of the ladies shared an experience, and she was saying that they had just buried a woman who was, in no man's land, and she was so frustrated because even her mother who she had hoped would understand,
Didn't allow her back.
was not understanding. And so she said, you know what, let me just take this poison
And go.
get done with it. And she died, you know. And so there's also those realities of suicide, even for rural women, that we may not talk about.
Yeah.
But then also the realities of food security. You know, where did the granary go? And what replaced the granary? Where I come from Teso, and when I was growing up, we had what we called a mukeke. You know, there was these potatoes that you would slice, and then you would dry them up, and you would eat a mukeke for about 6 months or more. These days, we have a weird variety of potatoes that almost can't hold a mukeke for more than 3 months.
Yeah.
And so during the drought, we have real hunger issues. And yet a mukeke was the food for the dry season. And so when you're talking, I'll bring you in. So when you're talking about food security also, it's to say, what is the rural woman's reality when floods happen? When the dry season is up, how is she surviving? How is she feeding the community? But yes, Rebecca.
Yeah, you bring a very important issue. So for the rural one, her most important needs is shelter and food. But we have also not encouraged them to be independent enough, and healthcare, thank you. And so getting back, because they're in the rural setup and our society is still patriarchal in a sense, there is little understanding of how a woman should live, how she should thrive. And so there is that clock that she's clogged, she has nowhere to run to. And so this is where, even in our advocacy, even in the work we do, even in our leadership, there needs to be a lot of emphasis is done on that. On the issue of you brought in a very important issue of food security. Yes. From a region like northern Uganda that has gone through a war, we must understand that for the rural woman, there has been a shift in the setup of how society used to run. There was a time where people stayed in camps. We no longer practice culture as it is. There has been brought in a different kind of foods, and so there needs to be conversations. For me, this is an advice I would give for northern Uganda. Conversations on how we need to start rethinking how we live. We need to start re-understanding and teaching back our culture, because we must acknowledge as a people that war has a way to destabilize that. It destabilizes and kind of creates a shift around how people live and work and plant and do everything. And so you find that there has been a change in culture, how people do things. There's been a change in how people stay. There has been that already insecurity. I am not comfortable with you because I don't know what your interests are. And so it also brings back the whole conversation around land. Because of the war, now we are seeing the chunks of land that have been left in parts of Acholi that we are now seeing government trying to take it on, giving it to investors. And so you find that for the rural woman, there is a lot of contesting ideas that need to be worked on.
I think this week I was listening to the news, and I was hearing civil society pushing for, in regard to industrialization, pushing for cooperatives to come back, and also granaries. I was like, yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah. Like, we should have that. Yes. Why did we lose that culture of? But it's also in our spendthrift kind of culture, and I don't want to believe that we are all spendthrifts, because I know people who keep. But the pandemic taught us
to keep.
Yes. Yeah. So in our push for industrialization and in the drive for cooperatives to come back, I believe the granary is a secret to that, or to how we can then move forward. Because we're a society that used to see beyond now. I mean, how do we last 6 months? And not only for mokeke, but even cassava would be kept. Even groundnuts, all these things used to be kept. Yes. And in the argument is, can we then, have cooperatives, or even the conversation on granaries, to be able to even have, market added value. It's like, now that I have dried, how do I, disseminate this matoke, dried as it is, so that when a person cooks it or makes an instant meal, they can still get the benefits of what it is. But for the rural women, and I think they can then, I don't know how we are going to do it. I don't want to believe that I have all the answers to this. But these are conversations that should be able to come back. But you said something key for women as a collective is that, where do we belong in this conversation? Because, I mean, you wake up, you have children who are going to be heirs to the land that should have been yours. I want to believe it's ours, virtue of the fact that you're married into this family. And so in between, continuing this patriarchal shift of land ownership. I mean, the men will then take the land and then you can't still go back.
Yeah.
So a woman finds herself in a position where she's on her own. How do we then, you know, push again for land ownership for these women? You know, get your kabanja. I listened to a story of a lady in these land issues, and
Yes.
she was having the argument that, look, I got a loan, I bought this land on Chivanja, I have the agreement, but the collective is taking this land away from me. I mean, government has come and they have investors that are willing to, you know, and the compensation is not coming in as it should, because I spent money, I paid my loan, I finished my loan, and yet still this land is not mine because I'm a Chivanja holder. So those are also questions on land that continually show up. Now that I own the land as a Chivanja holder, then what?
Then what? Yes.
What happens when they take it?
Yeah, but also maybe lastly on this conversation is that a study was done in Kenya, and it showed that rural women who had a certain level of access to education, irrespective, and 24 times more than the ones that did not have. So issues of negotiation, but also issues of capacity building for women, women's groups, skilling is important. And yet when we look at, again, our programs, one of the reasons that the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program was started was because the mainstream agricultural initiatives were missing out on women. You know, and so at what point do we begin to invest in skilling the rural woman? But within the context of COVID, are we alive to the realities of the young girls in rural communities who have not been able to go to school for 2 years?
Well, as a country, we are not. Today, I've had reports say that 23,000 girls in Lango region have been pregnated.
Yes.
2,000 from Bushenyi. And so it brings out the aspect that during the 2 years of we've been in COVID as a country, we have literally tried to protect people from COVID, but not protect people from other diseases.
Your president said that at least now there's one more child. You did hear him in his address. Anyway, but I totally hear you. And it's sad because one of the conversations we're having forward has been running a program for newly elected women MPs. And one of the the point has even vanished.
It's okay.
Yeah, it has now disappeared. But we're talking about oh yes, I've now remembered. And so part of the women's gender agenda was that they wanted to have more children going back to school. And then we told them, okay, whereas that is noble, has it dawned on you that the majority of the schools are actually church-owned? They're religious institutions. We are religious-owned. And we know the realities that religious institutions and Malawi are very conservative. And so I don't know whether we are also alive to that reality as a country, that the girls are getting pregnant, but even the process of getting them back into school is going to be very difficult because government does not own the majority of the schools.
And what you said, Bella, reminds me of the fact that we need to start to have conversations about a post-COVID curriculum. Because we are not going to go back to business as usual. And we lie to ourselves if we think that the curriculum that we had, and regardless of whether it is of use to us then, but a post-COVID curriculum is very important for us to be able to, one, realize that skilling might be the alternative that is better for these children. And then two, how do we assimilate them back into, you know, education, into study that might not necessarily look like what it was before, because I'm now a mother. So my reality might be, while I want to get an education, it might look like skilling me, so that I can then maybe be able to start earning. But there are children also. So how do you mentor them? It's a mess. It's a mess we've created, and it's going to take people that care. I don't know if we really have that at the helm of our education, you know, ministries, but people that care enough to see the reality is different. In these 2 years, we've had a shift. We have child mothers. There is a whole generation of children that are more aware to different things than we were when we were in school.
Yes.
So a conversation on post-COVID curriculums is going to be important, and it's not going to look the same. Yeah.
But also, because education in our country has been monetized in a sense that most schools are now privately owned,
Yeah.
I think it's going to also be hard, even while we bring in a new post-COVID curriculum. We just need to, even while Isabella will disagree, I want to also say that
We need to come back to the red card.
even actually, religious schools owned by religious institutions have helped.
The minister.
Because if you give an example, in Lango there is St. Mary's Aboke. It had a program of where girls were even pregnant would be in school. And so I think it's now about fine-tuning and getting some of these schools to bring back and be like more, how would I call it again, the word? Model schools that show
model
how
schools.
girls can still study,
Still
go back to school, even while they're expecting. But then also as a country, it is about time we start to have conversations around contraception. We had issues like we had the sexuality education that was, and then they were closing it out like
Conversation for another day.
But this needs, and they were like, this doesn't need to be discussed. We are spoiling our children.
And now the children are having
And
sex.
now children are having sex.
And they are pregnant.
And
But
the president, and we were just saying there is no way you can
I want
actually
you
get
to
this.
ask the public, aren't they tired of seeing their children home?
The public doesn't want to have that conversation. But maybe one of the things that we could do
But they
is
are
maybe
actually fearing
having
to
a
get them.
poll on the public and having kids at home,
Yeah.
and then on this issue of contraception, and see how that can feature into a conversation
Contraception
beyond
for
this.
teenage.
Yes.
Because
But now we are way out of time and we need to close the show.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, ladies, for walking through part of the issues that made it to the headlines, made it to the news this week. And next week we shall be back on the show. And to our audience, thank you very much for being with us always. Have yourselves a lovely afternoon and we will see you next week. Goodbye.